From the TV30 studio, here's Jim Schneider.
Well, hi, Happy New Year, and welcome to inFocus. So glad that you've joined us for our broadcast tonight. It's going to be our legislative update here for the month of January. There is much going on. This year of 2026 is going to be a very busy year as our state legislature winds its session down here in the next few months. We also have some important elections and a lot of public policy issues taking place. And I would encourage you to sit by your television tonight, have a little notebook, pen or pencil to jot down some information. We'll be passing along some bill numbers, some information on different public policy issues, and trust that you'll find the program to be beneficial to keep you as some of the best informed people here across the state as you watch this program. Joining me here tonight, we welcome back Daniel Degner, who is the president of Wisconsin Family Council. Daniel, good to have you back.
Hey, Happy New Year, Jim, and thanks for having us.
And good to have you here. We've got a busy year, and Sam Krebs with us tonight, who is the Legislative Director with Wisconsin Family Action. Happy New Year.
Thanks, Jim. Happy New Year to you as well.
And lots taking place. Your schedule is going to be a very busy one over the next few months.
Indeed. I was just looking at the calendar schedule for this week, and I think we had approximately 30 hearings alone going on the Capitol on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So busy times indeed. And
these are issues that you're directly involved with as far as having some kind of vested interest in their outcome.
Every single day we'll be at the Capitol paying attention to certain bills that are going on, yes.
Okay, some of those we'll be talking about here tonight. But first of all, this year of 2026 is a very important year as far as the elections. Daniel, we've got some things coming up.
Yeah, here in Wisconsin, there's going to be some really unique opportunities for the 2026 midterms. First, in April, we have a state Supreme Court race. Right now, liberals hold a 4-3 majority in the state Supreme Court, but there's an opportunity for conservatives to hold on to a seat. Unfortunately, Justice Rebecca Bradley is stepping down. She's retiring from that seat. So it's going to be an open race between liberal Chris Taylor, who's a former Planned Parenthood lobbyist, and Maria Lazar, who is a self-proclaimed independent judge, and she is from the Waukesha County area. And then there'll also be many important elections as we head into the fall. We'll have the governor's election. We'll have an election for attorney general, half the state Senate seats, and every state assembly seat. And it'll be a very important election cycle as we head into the fall. And with Sam's work in the Capitol, we believe there's a strong chance that voters will have an opportunity to protect their church from government closures on the ballot as well.
Okay, some very important issues. And Sam, we know that there has been a lawsuit brought against the Wisconsin Election Commission by the Trump administration. They want to have some integrity in our vote here.
Yeah, and not just Wisconsin. I think there's at least a couple dozen other states where the Department of Justice at the federal level is trying to access the voter records for various states to try to cross-compare them to driver's license records and other records to make sure that those records are being kept accurately and that the voter rolls are clean and are able to accurately represent who's voting in the state of Wisconsin.
If somebody were to ask you, point blank, are the voter records in Wisconsin clean? What do you respond?
I'd say that's a complicated question, Jim, because I've done some stuff on election work, and the way it's managed is, I think it boggles the mind. I think the way that the structure, that system that's set up right now doesn't make a lot of sense if you're trying to keep the things in records straight. And so I think there are some folks who would like to take a chance to maybe straighten out some of those things.
We can do better?
We can do better.
Okay. Well, talking about the elections coming up, one of the issues that we have is a governor's race. And this is a recent article here from the Center Square, and we have the addition of Mandela Barnes. We also have Joel Brennan, former Wisconsin Department of Administration Secretary. But just looking at this litany of candidates on the Democratic side, not only Mandela Barnes, but also Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez, Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, State Representative Francisca Hong, State Senator Kelda Royce, former Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation CEO Missy Hughes, and former State Representative Brett Hulsey. That's quite a lineup here on the Democratic ticket.
Yeah, and we saw Tony Evers last year announce that he was not going to run again, and it's just interesting to see there's so many Democrats that are in, but also what's really interesting to see is a lot of them coming from similar areas. We see Francisca Hahn and Kelda Royce from the Madison area. We see David Crowley, Mandela Barnes, and Sarah Rodriguez from the Milwaukee area, and so I'll be very interested to see who comes out on top. And some early polling data has shown that Mandela Barnes is right now the front runner for Democrats. And so it'll be interesting to see if he continues to maintain that lead through their primary.
And Sam, on the Republican side, Tom Tiffany, Congressman, and County Executive Josh Schoeman.
So kind of two very different perspectives there, because Congressman Tiffany is obviously from the Northwoods, and County Executive Josh Schoen is from Washington County. And so we have kind of two different flavors to pick from there. I think I recently saw a headline that the president potentially might weigh in an endorsement between those two candidates. But it gives you two solid options to pick from on the Republican side. On the Democrat side, you have a litany of options. And right now, it seems like there's a hard time for anyone to break through, because I've heard even more names that are kind of rumored and swirling about of maybe they'll get a run too. So I think the Democrats see an opportunity to win the governor's seat for a third term in a row, but also there's no strong front runner to say they're grabbing the reins and saying, hey, we're the person to do for the job.
Great. And I know, Daniel, you're going to be monitoring candidates and keeping the public informed on candidates and keeping churches informed. It's a very important election year.
Yeah, it's a very important election. The one thing, too, I would mention is we especially talk about these Democratic candidates. A lot of them, their record, especially on issues of life, on issues of marriage, family, religious freedom, a lot of them have a very terrible record. We even have seen one of these candidates has called for a statewide constitutional amendment to undo our marriage amendment that defines marriage between a man and a woman. So it'll be very important to watch these issues to see how they develop, because especially in a Democrat primary, we're seeing them run further and further to the left. And as a result of that, they're really alienating Christians on issues like marriage, family, life, and religious freedom.
Since you're with us last too, there was a resignation just took place recently. Judge Maxine Aldridge White retiring from the State Court of Appeals. This will not be on the ballot this year, but somebody who will be appointed, I believe, by the governor to fill the position until the next election. Is that correct? That's
correct. And yeah, there will be, in addition to the Supreme Court race that Daniel mentioned, there'll also be some county circuit judges, as well as your locally elected officials, school board members in the spring. So those all are important races to pay attention to. I know there's a Court of Appeals judge race in the Waukesha area, and that will be very important as well for people to pay attention to.
Daniel, this past middle December, we saw that the Wisconsin Supreme Court stopped their crusade against Catholic charities. Why is that important?
Well, it's so important because what we saw from Governor Evers' administration is what they were doing is they were telling Catholic Charities, a religious entity, Catholic Charities was serving people who weren't Catholic. Well, even though I'm not Catholic, as someone who comes from more Baptistic or evangelical background, we believe in serving people who don't go to our church. We believe in serving people that don't know Jesus. And so what this ruling by the Evers administration did is it said that the state was going to come in and tell a church or a parachurch ministry what is religious and what is not religious. And so we're really thankful that the U.S. Supreme Court overwhelmingly 9-0 overturned the Wisconsin State Supreme Court on this decision and said, no, it's up to the church to decide what is religious and what is not, and not the state. And what was really concerning for us at Wisconsin Family Council and Wisconsin Family Action is that wasn't enough for the Attorney General, Liberal Attorney General Josh Kaul, who will be on the ballot again. Josh Kaul went even further, and he again tried to undo the tax credit that they were getting with the Catholic Charities. And as a result of that, thankfully, this Wisconsin State Supreme Court finally learned their lesson and rejected his appeal.
Okay, and really that's got ramifications for all churches across the state of Wisconsin.
Yep, would affect all churches, camps, parachurch ministries, all of those. And so with the U.S. Supreme Court, again, had a great ruling 9-0 to overturn the Evers administration.
Something else that took place here just recently, we saw the felony conviction by a jury of a sitting Milwaukee County judge. We're talking about Judge Dugan. She has since resigned. And this, no doubt, will be a position, Governor Evers, would he also be filling this position? Or is that something that would happen on a county basis?
I'm not sure the details there, Jim. I think most likely the governor would appoint the vacancy there. But the case seemed to be clear cut from the beginning. The Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice, seemed very confident that they were presenting the facts of the case, and that's the way it turned out. When I was watching the headlines, it seemed like the defense was really struggling to counteract the facts of the case, where she clearly was misdirecting law enforcement in that situation. So very odd and unique situation to happen in general. You don't see judges undermining the law that they're sworn to uphold, but in this case you did see that, and the justice was carried out.
Okay, hitting a number of public policy issues, and we'll be talking about some legislation that is, some of it's up for a hearing this week, and some new bills have been introduced as well. Here's another story. This is something that's hitting all across this country, and it deals with the SNAP benefits. And here's a headline: what is Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers hiding about state SNAP recipients? We understand that he is being resistant to investigation by the federal government. We are seeing so much corruption take place in states across the nation, trying to get a handle to stamp out the fraud. In this regard, Tony Evers was pretty well digging his heels in on this issue.
Yeah, and it's a concern, and we've seen this time and time again by the Evers administration, but whenever there is fraud, or if there is even fraud, we should always be wanting to seek it out, to find it, but also to stop it. And the concern we see here at the governor is that he's not even willing to look in to see if there is fraud in the first place. And that should be a concern to us, because if he's unwilling to even allow the federal government to come in to investigate, that shows that there's probably something being hidden behind the curtain.
Here's another story that came out, this from the Center Square. Evers vetoes 9 bills, including a block on illegal Badger care enrollment. And legislation had come forth, Sam, to stop the governor from, or actually that would forbid illegal immigrants from receiving Badger care benefits. Governor Evers vetoed that, saying we don't need that.
Yeah, I mean, his argument is that it's duplicative and that they're technically not allowed to access it now. But we know for a fact that there have been people who were not legally citizens who have been on healthcare here in their country. So I think you see the priorities of the liberal left, and what they're trying to say is, well, we think it's not a priority to prevent those things. We don't think it's a priority to clean up our voter rolls. We don't think it's a priority to make sure our food stamps are not being fraudulently used. So I think you kind of see a pattern here of what are their priorities versus what the other side's priorities are.
Yeah.
And on that bill specifically, the one thing that really stood out to me was how, to me, it doesn't seem like a partisan bill to say that, only U.S. American citizens should receive welfare benefits. But we saw intense, heated debate on that bill in the state Senate, and I have never seen this before. But in the state Senate hearing room, one of the Democrat members actually jumped out of his chair, tried to steal the gavel from the chairman of that committee over that bill. And it's just really remarkable to see something that almost anyone would come together and say, no, if you're an undocumented or an illegal immigrant, you should not get Medicaid. Yeah. It just makes common sense to say, no, it's only for American citizens.
Well, certainly things are heating up between the two major parties here in the state of Wisconsin, and it just, and I don't know if you noticed this, Sam, on the hearings, the floor hearings and so forth, just that if one party has introduced something, the other party is automatically going to be against it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because there's this little back and forth. Almost every single bill that passes legislature, I think 90% of them are bipartisan. They actually have a bipartisan vote on them, or at least a unanimous vote where there's not an objection by the minority party. But if the flashpoints are like, how do you reach some of these solutions? And some of the, especially the big issues, these issues that are catching the eyes of people in the public, whether that's the pro-life issue or the transgender issue. Those really are the flashpoints where you're seeing the differentiations between the parties and how they want to address those solutions. And yeah, as you see, as we enter 2026 and we come closer and closer to election periods, you'll see that the parties are no longer thinking just about solutions. They're thinking about how can we win races to bring our solutions to the next year, Yeah.
Well, something Governor Evers did sign was a bill for sextortion. This is, again, from the Center Square, and I signed Braden's law. The law specifically outlaws sextortion, which is when someone blackmails another person by threatening to release sexual pictures or videos. Named after Braden Bond, a 15-year-old student from the Wausau area, took his own life earlier this year after he was sextorted. And this is something that's important that this was put into law.
Yeah, I'm really glad the governor signed this. And if you, as a viewer at home, if you have children, grandchildren, any young people that you love, we would highly encourage you to talk to them about the importance of this issue of sextortion. It's becoming very common, especially with young people, especially young teenage men. And I think it's so important that the legislature as well as the governor have come together on this issue specifically to say we need to do everything we can to go after and prosecute those who attack children this way.
And Jim, I think that's really important to mention too, that the gateway to sextortion is usually pornography. it doesn't just happen like they don't get access to your phone. It's usually you're involved in pornography, which leads to something, which leads to something, which leads to these scammers trying to extort teenagers or young men, young women, and try to usually get money out of them, try to get them to buy gift cards or things like that. And so what happens is they'll start threatening them. They'll have the young person will send a intimate picture of themselves, and the scammers will then try to hold that over their head, and they'll say, I'll send it to your friends, I'll send it to your parents, I'll send it to your church or your school. And so there's immense pressure put on these young people. And once again, that gateway to those extortion acts is usually through pornography. And that's why we are been pushing and are hopeful that our bill to put age verification measures on pornographic websites will go into law this year. We are hopeful for a vote in the Senate hopefully this month. And then at that point, it'll go to the governor for his signature. And that's really important. If we can keep the kids off the pornographic websites, we're going to really limit those exposures to extortion.
Something else that Governor Evers signed into law was this legislation that schools have to notify parents by the end of the day, whether or not there has been a credible report of their child being the victim of sexual misconduct by a member of the school staff.
Yeah, Jim, not much to say about this other than I think it seems pretty common sense.
Yeah,
from all sides, it seems like it's pretty obvious that if your child is involved in a situation, whether substantiated or not, you should be, as a parent, aware of what's going on and be intimately involved in the process as it is investigated.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about the schools, and this story also caught my attention, and we'll soon be on some legislation. But here it is. The report is Wisconsin schools allocated COVID funds on historic staffing, not recovery. The story indicates that Wisconsin schools spent 41% of the $1.49 billion in pandemic recovery federal taxpayer funding on permanent salaries rather than temporary learning recovery solutions, while allocating the funding slowly and without transparency, according to a new report. The funding came as the state's public schools added 2,141 staff, while losing 47,092 students from 2019-2020 school year to 2024-25, according to in-depth spending analysis from the Institute for Reforming Government. So what we have is the whole matter of staffing just going off the charts and student enrollment really declining here. And there's been that one-time COVID money put into salaries rather than into really solid education programs.
They did exactly what they were told not to. I remember when that COVID money was first being dispersed, it was very clear, don't spend it on long-term expenses. Don't, buy buildings. Don't, have in these expensive projects. And especially don't do salaries, because that money is going to get cut off because it's only one time. It was specifically for learning loss during COVID. It was to help the kids who were not in school to catch up and try to get back on track with their learning. And instead they said, we're going to push this into higher salaries for teachers. And well, I'm sure the teachers are grateful for that, and that's good for the teachers, but when that money got turned off, now who's paying for those higher salaries?
Oh, we have to have a referendum to make the taxpayers fund.
Yes, or your property taxes go up.
Right.
So it's this, they were warned about this. A lot of schools were warned about this, and a lot of them apparently didn't heed the warning. And I think just point out in that story, there is this trend both in the college level and in the K-12 system. You see staffing go up like this. It's just going higher and higher and higher, especially for administrative, not specifically teachers usually, but for administrative staff. Meanwhile, their enrollment is going down. There's less kids, and there's less kids in their schools. I know Waukesha specifically is dealing with this issue where they have far fewer kids than they did 10 years ago. And it's this question of why are we retaining so many buildings and so many people? And so I think the wise school districts will learn that they need to adjust and be adaptable to the population growth or decline that they're dealing with. While other districts are just going to say, well, we're just going to keep the status quo, or we're going to keep on spending more and more.
Yeah, again, those numbers are staggering, adding 2,141 staff and losing 47,092 students.
Yeah, and Jim, your point about the referendum is so important, because we get phone calls at our office all the time of people asking about different referendum questions that come up on their ballots. And one of those is often schools. And again, time and time again, we hear that, oh, we need this referendum or else we'll have to cut staff. But then when you look into the details, well, they added those staff during COVID. And if instead they would have been smart, they would not have added the staff at that time, and they would adjust to where their student population is as well as their funding from the state is. They won't be running into these issues, but instead they keep going back to the taxpayer. And many people got their tax bills in the last month and were very frustrated. And this is a direct result of these referendums, a direct result of Governor Ever's 400-year tax increase, is that you are going to have higher property taxes.
Yeah, indeed.
And that's why school board races matter. I know we mentioned at the beginning of the show that in spring you'll have a lot of your school board members up, and it's a question to ask them. They often hold town halls or have their phone number or email. Ask them questions like this. What did we do with the COVID money? What did we do? What is our plan for the future if our population continues to decline? What is your ideas to make sure that we don't overspend and we still take care of our kids?
Friends, you're watching inFocus, our legislative update here from the month of January. And this very week, there are some public hearings that are going on in Madison. We want to bring them to your attention. And friends, you're able to weigh in on these issues, either by attending the public hearing or at least by getting word to committee members, to your own legislator as well. And we're going to, first of all, focus on some public hearings that are happening Tuesday, January 6th, this is tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning. This is the Committee on Education. We've got a few bills we're going to talk about here, one of which is on Senate Bill 600 pertaining to the federal tax credit programs for contributions to scholarship granting organizations. What does all that mean?
Yeah, Jim, so this is regarding, so if you remember last summer, the federal government passed a budget, and in one of the provisions in that budget actually created a SGO program, so Scholarship Granting Organization Program. So what does that do? It actually allows people on their tax return to up to $1,700 donate to these organizations who give out scholarships. And so your tax bill goes down by $1,700 or up to $1,700, and then that money is given out to students, whether that's public, private, choice, charter, homeschool, and can provide any sorts of needs, whether it's paying for tuition or supplies or special tutoring. It's really a huge opportunity to have privately driven money, so there's no government money involved. It's just money that's not going to the federal government through your taxes, and giving maybe potentially these big opportunities for our kids. But there's one caveat with that. The legislation that the federal government passed, it said the governor of each state or the head of their Department of Education has to opt in to the program. It's not passive. You can't just say, well, we're all going to do it. They have to actively say, we're joining the program. We're going to do this in order for us to take advantage of it, specifically as a state. Now, I can donate that $1,700 in Iowa if Iowa sets the program up, but that money has to go to Iowa kids if Wisconsin chooses not to opt in. And unfortunately, what we've been hearing, what the governor has publicly stated, is that he's not interested in this program. He's not interested in leveraging these money for kids in our state. He has decided we are not going to opt in. And so that bill would be to force the governor to opt into the program and put public pressure on him, because quite honestly, I don't see a downside whether you're a public school advocate, a private school advocate, or anything in between. It's beneficial for everyone. So I think the governor's making a big mistake of missing on this one, and hopefully members of his party also will see that as well.
So this is Senate Bill 600. It's companion Assembly Bill 602, and 602 has already passed the Assembly, passed November 19th. That vote was 54 to 44. So Daniel, this last hurdle then to make it through the Senate.
Yeah, and unfortunately we saw it was on party lines in that last vote, and hopefully we see bipartisan support. But what Sam shared is just so true. This isn't a Republican issue, Democrat issue. This is a child issue. This is an education issue. And what's so frustrating, at least from what I've seen from the governor, what I've seen from those that oppose it, is they say, well, this will help choice schools. This will help private schools. And we shouldn't be caring about if it's private school or public school. We need to be focused on what is best for kids. And this bill benefits kids in private school, public school, as well as charter and homeschool.
Let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to, what was it, last January, February? Isn't this pronounced the year of the kid?
Yeah, last year was the year of the kid. Yeah.
This 2025, the year of the kid, and I know we're going to hear the year of something else coming up at a news statement, but this is something that's going to help children, and what you're saying is the governor has been speaking in opposition to it. Yeah,
and what's crazy too is Sam mentioned this. It's a $1,700 tax credit, so it's $1,700 off your federal taxes. That's per person. If you're married, $3,400. And so I know our family, we're going to take advantage of this if Wisconsin offers it or doesn't, but I would much rather have it be actually taken and given to Wisconsin kids than I'd rather have it be Iowa kids or Ohio kids. We love kids everywhere, but we'd much rather have kids in our own backyards benefited from this.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim, and Daniel's point, I would really encourage you to jot that down, whether you do your own taxes or you have a CPA. Keep that in the back of your mind. The program starts January 1st, 2027. So on your taxes for that, you can then take advantage of that credit. If Wisconsin doesn't opt in, unfortunately, if they don't, the governor continues to stonewall, you can still help kids in other states, and there'll be organizations that will specifically be set up to help Christian students, Christian private school students.
Some are already doing
students.
this, starting to solicit for this.
Correct. So there are organizations that are going to be worthy of supporting, that are going to be really great. I think there's some folks in Wisconsin who would be really excited to do that. But if that opportunity is not there, don't say, oh, well, it's not Wisconsin. There could be opportunities to help kids across the country. So, and once again, to your benefit is that you're paying less in taxes to help kids be better educated.
Yeah. Okay. So that public hearing taking place tomorrow. We'll give you some details on that public hearing in just a moment. But there's something else going on in that same public hearing tomorrow, and that is on Senate Bill number 120 and Assembly Bill 103. This is school board policies related to changing a pupil's legal name and pronouns.
Yeah, and Jim, I actually saw on the assembly side of this, I sat through the hearing. I think that just those bills alone, that bill alone took almost, I think, 3-4 hours of debate and testimony. So I'm expecting that to be a long one as well tomorrow. And it reminds me of the recent court case out of California that said that parents have a right to know if their kids are transitioning at their school. And so it comes down to that kind of core issue of what are the parental rights if a child is struggling with gender dysphoria and they've revealed this at their school, does the parent have a right to know that? And so that's getting at some of that issues of setting up policies that would inform parents and keep them involved in their kids' process of figuring out their identity. And so I think that's really important to see how that plays out here in Wisconsin, because there's court cases, once again in California, court cases making their way up to the federal Supreme Court. So this is not an issue that's going to go away. It's not going to be just this hearing and moved on. We're going to be hearing about this for a while yet. So
this is going on the Senate Committee on Education and taking place tomorrow, but this is Senate Bill 120 and Assembly Bill 103. AB 103 did pass the Assembly, but it was way last March, 10 months ago, that it passed on a vote of 50-43. And this public hearing, and we're going to just flip the page here, and at the top we're going to see that public hearing taking place Tuesday, January 6th, 10 o'clock in the morning at room 300 Southeast at the state capitol. Daniel.
Yeah, I was just going to say what Sam mentioned too, that case in California is so important for Wisconsin. Wisconsin Family Council over the years, we've been fighting for these families where their kids have been going to schools like Madison Metropolitan School District, and the school was secretly transing their kids behind the parents' back. And so this case went to a federal appellate court in California, and thankfully that court ruled that no, you can no longer, and this was just over the holiday break, that you can no longer do this to kids. You must make the parents involved in these conversations and these discussions. And we're really hopeful that that could make a big impact, not just in California, but also here on our own home front here in Wisconsin.
Let's hit another issue, and this is another public hearing that takes place. That one starts at 10 o'clock. This one starts at 10:01, according to the official Tuesday, January 6th, 10:01, and this one is going to be in room 417 North, a public hearing, but this one is the Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety. I'm just going to flip the page because there's one bill that we're going to draw attention to our viewers here tonight, and that's Assembly Bill 677 that creates a crime of grooming a child for sexual activity and providing a penalty.
Yeah, Jim, and I believe when we were in the program a few months ago, maybe it was October or September, we had talked about this breaking news story of approximately 200 cases of teachers who were being investigated for sexual misconduct or for grooming a child for sexual favors. And so, and what we saw was DPI was potentially not investigating those properly, or they were not reporting them as transparently as they could be. And so one of the things that came out of that investigation was, well, we really don't have a crime for grooming in the state of Wisconsin. It's hard to nail down what does that mean in law. And so law enforcement has asked specifically for there to be a law created that would create a crime for grooming. And so that's what that bill does. And it'll be holding a hearing to kind of hear from, once again, the teachers, from law enforcement, from people who are involved in the education process, as well as other members of the public, to figure out how do we accurately define this? How do we make sure that we're not overly, being aggressive and taking out people who are just caring for kids versus people who are actually doing things specifically in a strategic manner to get sexual favors from them.
Yeah.
And what's really concerning for that bill, and I'm really thankful for Representative Nedweski for authoring this bill and championing this bill, but what's a huge concern for us is the governor's come out publicly and said he's likely to veto this bill. And this is just another one where we go like, in what world do we think this makes sense? The education governor, former superintendent, who has probably dealt with some of these situations behind the scenes, he should be someone that should advocate for children's safety. Unfortunately, he said he's going to veto this bill.
Friends, as we continue on talking on different issues, we're also opening our phone lines tonight to give you opportunity to ask your questions, maybe on these or other public policy issues that are going on in the state of Wisconsin. Our phone number is 414-935-3030, 414-935-3030. Toll free, you may reach us at 1-800-733-8830. That's 1-800-733-8830. Or 414-935-3030. If you'd like to text in your question this evening or your comment, just include your first name and the area, your city that you're texting from, and include in brief form your question or brief comment, and you can use that text number tonight, which is 414-459-9638. That's 414-459-9638. And we welcome your comments, your text here this evening as well. Daniel Degner and Sam Krebs with us tonight from Wisconsin Family Council, Wisconsin Family Action. It's a legislative update tonight, and there is much taking place in our state. We've talked about elections so far. We've talked about some of the public policy issues going on in the news. Now covering some of the issues going on in our state legislature this very week, and public hearings that are going on. And friends, unless we communicate with our legislators, they don't know how to represent us. The only way they know is for us to actually reach out to them. There is a legislative hotline number that you may utilize to communicate. That's 800-362-9472. That's the legislative hotline, 1-800-362-9472. But tonight, our phone lines are open if you have a question, a comment that you'd like to make on our legislative update. We're going to, that public hearing taking place, we mentioned on Tuesday. There's also something called an executive session taking place on Wednesday. This is where the committee has already had the public hearing. The committee is coming back for a vote. This is a committee on health, aging, and long-term care in the state assembly, and they're coming back to have a vote on Assembly Bill 546 relating to limitations on the definition of abortion. Daniel, help us understand this.
Yeah, so this bill is very plain and clear, and unfortunately, the reason we need to do it is because of what we've seen from Democrat politicians as well as the abortion lobby that have tried to conflate the issue of miscarriage and the issue of abortion. And my wife and I, we both lost our child to ectopic pregnancy as well as a miscarriage is what they call it. And so we experienced the heartfelt pain of losing a child. And what we've seen from the abortion lobby is they've said, well, a miscarriage is the exact same as an intentional abortion. And everyone naturally, logically knows that that is not true. One is the intentional killing of unborn life, and one is the tragic, sad loss of unborn life. And so what this bill does is it makes it crystal clear that no pro-life conservatives, they believe that miscarriage is not an abortion, and that miscarriage should not be viewed the same as an abortion from a penalty statute perspective. Thankfully, this has already passed the Senate. Now this bill is up for the Assembly committee vote, and then the next steps would be the Assembly floor if it gets enough votes in the caucus, and then it would go to the governor. But unfortunately, we've seen the governor has said that he would veto this bill as well.
And I see the Senate, Sam, has already passed this legislation, 18-15. They did that during the month of November.
They did, and I'll say this is the second time this bill has been around. Last session, it was around, the Senate also passed it. We're heartened because last time around the Assembly didn't want to touch the issue for political reasons, but now we have a hearing, we have an executive session, so a vote on it in the committee, and now it's available for the full Assembly. So we're heartened by that because that means there's progress being made. There's opportunity here to talk to people, to talk about the pro-life issues and to say why we believe that life begins at conception, why that's important, and why the difference between abortion and miscarriages should be clear in law. And so we're heartened by the progress we're making so far on this bill.
And this is one that, again, has the executive session. It's Wednesday, January 7th. The members of the Assembly Committee here are going to be voting on this 9:30 in the morning. It is on their docket.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say too with that, and Sam mentioned that last session it did not have enough political muster, and there was concerns of, is this a politically good bill? And the one thing I would say for any pro-life legislator, any conservative legislator right now is there's so much uncertainty that voters have about, is my representative, is my senator, do they really have the same values as me on the life issue? And now is not the time to retreat, but now is the time to aggressively make very clear, here's what we believe about the unborn, here's what we believe about life, and protecting the sanctity of human life, and making sure that we stand against where Wisconsin is headed if there's not a difference. Right now, abortion is legal through the first 5 months of pregnancy in Wisconsin. If Democrats get the House, the Senate, and the governor in 2026, we can almost guarantee that they will push for abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. We need to find ways for conservatives and pro-lifers to be very clear that they oppose an agenda that advances abortion through all 9 months.
Friends, we'd like your reaction to these issues here tonight. These are critical matters facing our state. Our number here for inFocus, 414-935-3030. That's 414-935-3030 or 800-733-8830. And our text line is open as well. Just include your first name, the city, and your question that you'd like to ask, or a brief comment, 414-439-9638. That's our text line here this evening. I noticed that Speaker Voss had an interview on December 30th, had an interview on many different things. And one of the things he stated, though I'd like to bring forth and hear from you on, he expects Wisconsin to have legislation come forth and be voted on in the State Assembly to legalize online sports betting. And he is looking for a vote in the Assembly on this.
Yeah, Jim, this is something we talked about at length at our previous program, was like the harms of gambling, because of the advocacy of Wisconsin Family Action and other organizations pushing back, that bill was actually pulled from the floor. And it seems like from the comments that were referenced, that they're going back to the drawing board on it. And I'm heartened to see that some of the points that we brought up, that there was no limitations on the betting, there was no restrictions on how it was taking place, because something that the legislature has been looking at is cell phones in classrooms and cell phones with kids access and how that's affecting their brain. Well, it's the same thing with betting. If you have that betting on your phone and you're able to bet on every pitch and every throw, on every run, on every pass, it affects how people perceive things. And so we're seeing the leader of the Assembly actually say, we need to stipulate restrictions at this, actually. And that was not the case at the beginning. The beginning was just wide open, no restrictions. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that they're actually they're backing up and saying, no, we need restrictions, I think is a positive. It means our message is getting through. I think our position still is that we would like the bill not to happen at all, because I think expanding that sports gambling will have huge detrimental effects on both the family and our society as a whole. We've seen studies where in states where they legalize gambling, for every $1 that someone spent on gambling, $2 less are put into savings or investments. And so it's not good for both the financial health, but it's also not good for the social health of our state. We also see in states where they've legalized sports gambling that there's higher disruption, there's more crime and things like that. So it's not
domestic abuse.
Domestic abuse, yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely a social and financial toll to legalizing sports gambling. So we would say, let's not do that. Yeah. And let's instead focus on other priorities like strengthening the family. But at least in the positive front, they are taking a step back away from the bill and looking at restrictions.
And friends, this is where Robin Voss needs to hear from you across the state on this. I mean, he's optimistic that they're going to see a vote. He in essence, in my opinion, wants to see this passed in the Wisconsin State Assembly. The article here from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel indicates Governor Evers would likely sign this into law. Is online sports betting a good policy for Wisconsin? I'd like to hear from you on that issue tonight. 414-935-3030. Daniel.
Yeah, I was going to say with that too, and if it does go to the floor for a vote, that means they have the votes to pass it for the viewers at home to know. And again, our heart as an organization, as a ministry, is we want to do things that strengthen, advance, and promote God's design for the family. And the one negative we see with sports gambling is time and time again is it tears the fabrics away of God's design that he has for the family. But we see higher rates of bankruptcy, we see higher rates of divorce, we see higher rates of domestic violence, all these sort of things that negatively impact the family. And so we would argue as an organization, we should find ways, just like Sam said, to find ways to promote marriage, to promote the family, to help provide opportunities for people to break free from bondage instead of throwing them into bondage like sports gambling does.
You two were on with us the first Monday of December, and I've looked just at the legislative website. There have been 200 plus bills that have been introduced, and it's just amazing to see the flurry of activity that's going on when we have a session that's going to be winding down over these next few months. But there were just a few of these we want to call to the attention of our viewers and know that these are pieces of legislation that you'd have vested interest in through your organizations as well. This is Assembly Bill number 660 and Senate Bill number 635. And it relates to the refundable individual income tax credit for premarital counseling. Tell us about this legislation.
Yeah, Jim, so mentioning, we talk about strengthening the family, here's one opportunity for that. So an idea that we've been presenting to the legislature is how do we get stronger marriages, and how does the government play a role in that without actively getting involved in the relationship? Mm-hmm. So one idea that we had was, what if we incentivize folks to get premarital counseling? We've seen surveys that essentially only about 30% of couples get premarital counseling. And that's a very small amount of marriages that have premarital counseling. But we see on the flip side, for couples who do have premarital counseling, we see almost a 30% reduction in divorces. And so we see the positive of saying, if you go get premarital counseling, you're more likely to not get divorced. And we see it as a positive for our society and for healthy marriages, because that's what we're looking for, not just for people to get married, but that actually have really good and strong marriages. And so here's one opportunity for the legislature to take a look at, okay, if we do that, how do we incentivize people to make wise decisions? And one of that would be a tax credit.
Okay, and again, this is Assembly Bill 660, Senate Bill 635.
Yeah, the one thing I'd just go off of what Sam shared is this has huge ramifications. We talk long-term too about the overall budget. One of the concerns we consistently hear from legislators is their concern about our welfare spending, our concerns that we have about people being dependent on the welfare system. And unfortunately, one of the easiest ways for people to end up on the welfare system is to be a single mother. And if we can provide opportunities to promote premarital counseling, to keep those marriages intact, to keep those families together, it's not just a benefit for that family, but it's also a benefit to the taxpayer as well.
It is, yeah. You talked about societal costs before, and it's all connected with that. So that's a couple of bills just introduced, and wanted to bring those to your attention. This is another pair of bills just introduced. This one here, Assembly Bill 809, introduced on December 23rd, and Senate Bill 804, just introduced January 2nd, just a few days ago. And these deal with what's called investigation of any pregnancy outcome, and then civil and criminal liability exemptions related to pregnancy outcome. What is this concerning?
Yeah, Jim, so this is actually, we talked a little bit earlier in the program about the bill that defined abortion and making sure that it was clear that abortion and miscarriage are legally different items. And so this is actually the Democrats' response to the Republicans' bill on that issue. Their response is to say that, well, if there's any pregnancy loss whatsoever, there should be no investigation, no opportunity to say, even if there is suspicion of something bad happening or some bad intent happening, that there should be zero opportunity.
Like rape or sexual abuse?
I'm talking specifically for the mother, if there's a pregnancy loss, there is no situation under that bill under which that mother could be investigated for abuse towards the child.
Okay.
So the way the bill is written is really concerning, because there's some just really unprecedented some things in there. For example, in the bill it's written that the police cannot investigate unless they have the permission of the woman who would be investigated. I think most criminals would like this system where you can't investigate me for my wrongdoing or suspicion of wrongdoing unless I give you permission to do it. And I've never ever seen that in any sort of bill before. And it's just crazy. There's not really a better word for it, but just simply crazy to say someone we suspect of doing something that is wrong, that's currently illegal, we're not allowed to investigate unless they give me permission. And what that also does is it also enables people who potentially are abused or potentially are being pimped out, and so they have a handler. And if they're being used in that way, this bill, I think, implies that they would be shielded from investigation. And so the Democrats' response to, differentiating between abortion and miscarriages is so extreme and so bizarre, because unlike the bill that says miscarriages are unintentional, abortions are intentional, their bill says they're all the same and they should be treated all the same. And oh, by the way, we should never ever investigate if something bad happens to
just
an infant.
Compare that to another scenario. You get somebody who does retail theft from Walmart. And do you go to them for permission to say, can we investigate you for retail theft?
Yeah, and I would say almost a good analogy for this is like a car accident. When there's a car accident and the police are involved, they're going to question everyone that's involved. That doesn't mean that everyone is going to go to jail or is responsible for the accident, but they're conducting an investigation to figure out what happened. And in some of these really tragic scenarios, we've heard stories of women who had their baby and then left it in the toilet, or had the baby in a closet and then just threw them out in the trash. And so those situations do deserve investigation. There's suspicious cause for that. And so I think by saying there's absolutely no scenario under any pregnancy outcome where anyone can be investigated for an adverse outcome for the infant, I just think that's so bizarre and so out of touch with reality, but also is potentially enabling people to do some really terrible things and get away with it and be completely immune from the law.
Yeah. Well, friends, as our guests have stated before, this is really giving a foretaste of what will happen if indeed the Assembly and the Senate cross parties and change its leadership and have a Democratic governor. This is the type of legislation that will be introduced. That's Assembly Bill 809, Senate Bill 804, just brand new legislation put into play here. There is a text that came just a bit ago here, and let me get it from one of our listeners, Linda in West Bend, who is just so very thankful, she is saying, for thank you for helping with pro-life and anti-abortion bills. And also we have here, and I think by saying there's absolutely no scenario under any pregnancy outcome when anyone can be investigated for an adverse outcome for the infant, I just think that's so bizarre and so out of touch with reality, but also is enabling people to do some really terrible things and get away with it immediately. So, I mean, it's very troubling to see that aspect come through here.
Yeah, and absolutely, Jim. And what's interesting, too, for us as an organization, as we look at these bills, the author of this bill is a candidate for governor upcoming this year in 2026. And so this is the sort of thing that we'll continue to see as we get closer and closer to that governor's election in August for the primary as well as the November general. But it's very clear where the candidates are making their line in the sand on this issue. We have especially this one candidate, Senator Royce, who authored this bill, running for governor. She's made it very clear without a shadow of a doubt that she will do whatever she can to advance abortion through the moment of birth.
Yeah. So these issues are up. That's AB 804 and AB 809, Senate Bill 804, just brand new introduced legislation. And friends, if you'd like to comment on this, please pick up your phone and give us a call here. Our lines are open for inFocus, 414-935-3030. 414-935-3030. This is Milwaukee's only live interactive talk program on television where you can actually call and let your views be heard and have your questions addressed. 414-935-3030 or 800-729-9829. I'm sorry, I'll get that toll-free number corrected, 800-733-8830. And our text line here as well tonight is 414-459-9638. Let's talk about another pair of bills that's just been introduced, and this is Assembly Bill 718, Senate Bill 734, and this relates to the prescription use and disposal of abortion-inducing drugs, and a penalty involved with this as well.
Yeah, Jim, and so this bill, I really appreciate the heart of the authors on this. They're both very strongly pro-life individuals, and so what they're trying to get at is the fact that many of the abortions now are not surgical abortions anymore. Many of them are chemical abortions. So a woman takes a pill called mifepristone, which essentially detaches the placenta, and then another pill called misoprostol, which then ejects the placenta from the body, and along with that, the baby. And so their concern is that these abortion chemicals are being often flushed down into our wastewater system. And so their attention is specifically on how does that affect our wastewater system. And so, like I said, I really appreciate their heart for pro-life. Our concern would be that by doing something like that, you're taking the attention off of the baby that's being killed and the woman that's being harmed. Because once again, these abortion drugs, we know that approximately 11% of women have some sort of adverse experience with mifepristone, whether that's sepsis or excessive bleeding and other infection and other things that would cause them to go to the emergency room. We would like that focus to stay on the baby that's lost, the baby that has been killed with this tragic opportunity, or this tragic thing, and the opportunity for the woman to change her mind if she does take mifepristone. And once again, I think by making it a wastewater issue instead of a human life issue, we lose sight of the goal here.
A new legislation just introduced December 3rd and December 12th in the Assembly and the Senate. Let's hit a couple other bills just introduced as well since you were last with us. This is Assembly Bill number 806, introduced on December 23rd. Its Senate companion is Senate Bill 799 that was introduced on December 22nd, and this relates to parental access to health records of minors. Why does this need to be in legislative format? Don't parents right now have access?
Well, Jim, that's a funny story. So when I first started this job a couple summers ago, this is one of the first things that someone asked me was like, hey, I'm hearing from this person who said that their access to their kids' MyChart, their health records got cut off at 13. And I was like, oh, that seems very odd. So I did some digging, and sure enough, there's a company in Wisconsin called Epic who runs most of the healthcare records in the state of Wisconsin. Whatever health system you're in, if you have a MyChart, it's run by Epic. And what their standard operating procedure is that when you have kind of a joint account with your child, when they turn 13, the parent gets cut off, and they don't get access back into their kids' health records until the kid signs off and says, yes, my parent can have access to my health records.
Right.
And that's concerning on a number of levels, whether that's for things that they're addressing, whether it's teenage pregnancy, or if they're going through transgender treatments, or trying to access transgender treatments, in drugs and surgeries. So there's things like that can be hid from the parents, and ultimately the parents should be involved in those healthcare decisions. I mean, 13 is a very young age. And so what we're seeing is these health companies, these data companies, they keep on trying to push the age of consent lower and lower for these kids. And again, these are minors. Their parents are still responsible for their medical bills and their care and making decisions and so forth. They're held accountable in so many regards, but not having access to healthcare records? Yeah, and the thing is too, minors cannot be held responsible for contracts, and some of this stuff, if you're paying the bills for them, that the parents are ultimately culpable for those costs, but they're being withheld from knowledge of these things. So that bill specifically would try to address some of those situations, allowing more parental control over healthcare records and making sure that they're accessible to them, making sure that the data records companies are respecting parental rights. And so we will see where that goes at this point. It's late in the session. When you read the number, it was in the 800s, and we're knocking on the door of over almost 1,000 bills we introduced this session. So I'm not sure where it will be going this session, but I think it's good for the conversation to move forward, so that parents should be aware, especially parents right now. If you have a kid who's turning 12 or 13, make sure you're paying attention to a couple of things. One, their healthcare records. The other is if they have a cell phone, Google will actually send your kid an email and say, hey, you can take off the parental consent at 13, and you can no longer see what they're accessing on their phone. So really important things to be paying attention to.
Let me share here, and in the final minutes, a couple of resolutions that have been introduced as well. This is Assembly Joint Resolution 122. It has a Senate companion, the Senate Joint Resolution 114. But it caught my attention. It recognizes December 25th as the celebration of the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. They talk about whereas long ago in Bethlehem, the angel Gabriel told the Virgin Mary that she would give birth to a son named Jesus, whereas Mary and her husband Joseph traveled to Bethlehem in Judea, and while there, the time came for Mary to have a child, and whereas Mary wrapped her newborn son in strips of cloth, laid him in a manger, for there was no room for them in the inn, whereas that on holy night an angel alerted nearby shepherds that the Son of God was born, and they came to visit him, whereas 8 days after his birth, the baby boy named Jesus, and whereas in celebration of the birth of our Savior, wise men followed the Star of Bethlehem to the baby Jesus, bearing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh to honor his divinity and kingship. And whereas December 25th, a holiday we celebrate as Christmas, offers Christians the opportunity to honor the birth of Jesus Christ. And whereas the observance of Christmas, Christians attend church services, should serve special meals with loved ones, sing carols, pray for forgiveness and peace on earth, whereas this day reminds us of his gift of salvation and love, which we share through charity and generosity. And whereas it's an incumbent upon the legislature to honor December 25th as a sacred day for millions of Christians across Wisconsin, now therefore be it resolved by the Assembly of the Senate concurring that the Wisconsin legislature hereby recognizes December 25 as the celebration of the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. Wow.
Yeah, I would say I've just been really impressed so far this session. We've seen very bold proclamations of the gospel, whether it be from Representative Ron Tussler sharing his testimony of how Jesus helped him through his cancer, how he was miraculously saved from his cancer, but more importantly, how each and every one of the members in the state assembly chamber needed Jesus over everything else. What really encouraged me with that list too is we saw it was bipartisan. We need, especially as Christians, we can't view politics through the lens of Republican as the elephant or the donkey, but we need to view everything in our life through the Lamb, Jesus Christ. And so I think that's so encouraging that we saw bipartisan support from Democrats and Republicans alike on this resolution, because ultimately each and every one of those elected officials will someday bow the knee to Jesus, and hopefully they have come to faith in Christ.
Sam, do you think these will get a vote?
I don't know. Christmas already passed, so I don't know if they'll take up on the floor. But I think it's just really positive to see, as Dino mentioned. I don't remember that being a resolution years past. So just having the boldness to put that out there, and for once again, Dino mentioned Republicans, Democrats alike coming together on that. Really positive. We hope to continue to see things like that in the future.
Tell you what, we've got just a minute left. I want to mention another resolution came to proclaim November 20th as Wisconsin's Transgender Day of Remembrance. That was issued on December 17th. And then December 30th, prohibiting the governor from using the partial veto decree or increase any tax or fee. Sam, you got 30 seconds.
Very quickly, well, the tax one is very easy. People are getting their property taxes bills right now, and you might have noticed that they're significantly higher for many people. Part of that is because of the governor's veto that increased the property taxes. So this will give an opportunity for people to weigh in this November on whether they like how the governor vetoed their property taxes higher.
Yeah, so that likely will be on an election day vote?
Yeah, they'll likely be in the November election, as well as there's a strong likelihood that there'll also be a referendum question to protect churches from government closures in the future.
You've got a website, Daniel, where people can stay involved and informed.
Yep, at wifamilycouncil.org, and you can reach us by phone at 888-378-7395.
And stay informed on vital issues. Get involved in their email listing and Wisconsin Family Council, Wisconsin Family Action to stay informed on critical matters. And gentlemen, thank you both for coming in and helping to inform our viewers.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it. And friends, the monthly legislative update just really keeps you informed on critical issues and lets you know what's going on in Madison, Wisconsin, and how you can let your voice be heard. Legislators do need to hear from you about a very important election year that's before us as well. So friends, be praying for those that are in authority. Why? Scripture says that we might lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. Thanks so much for joining us here on TV 30's inFocus. Have a good night.